President Trump is surrounded by the wealthiest cabinet, the wealthiest administration in modern U.S. history. Does this concern you?
I don't think it's so much about their wealth. It's just because they might have some kind of the views or some things that I don't agree, and they would push a lot of decisions and changes in our government that I wouldn't support or would like to see happen in there too. So it doesn't really follow their wealth. For me, it just follows some of these kinds of core beliefs and the things that they're willing to push and to do.
What about this idea that we're sort of creating American oligarchs?
Yeah, and I would ask Democrats, like, start talking like a regular person. Most people are not sure what an oligarch is. You know, it's like, okay, is an oligarch, is it a rich dude or woman? Okay, well, but there's also a little secret too. Democrats, you know, we like billionaires if they're giving to our causes or to our party as well too.
But there's a difference. Hold on. There's a difference between a very wealthy donor.
It's unlimited money. It's unlimited money. That's the poison of American democracy. Get rid of unlimited money, and then that would render billionaires on either side to those kinds of a thing. And so remember, a lot of these billionaires that were in tech, they used to be more friendly to the Democratic interest in our party as well too. So,
but there's a difference.
Unlimited money, get rid of that, and that would transform America more than any single other decision.
All right, guys, so we got to talk about this fascinating interview between Stephanie Ruhle, who is a propagandist for MSNBC, with Rainn Wilson, who has a podcast, and they are going to be talking about losing trust in the media, right? Why is it that the American people don't trust the media? Okay, I think the most unpopular institutions in this country are the Democrat Party and the mainstream liberal media. Okay, I'm just saying, okay, they're very disliked, and this is why a lot of people are moving over to alternative media. And Stephanie Ruhle is going to try to blame President Trump for the failures of herself and her colleagues when it comes to losing trust among the American people, and I want to react to it. But before we get into it, it is important that you guys know, just for context, Stephanie Ruhle is very, very, very far left when it comes to illegal immigration. Okay, this woman, I don't think she believes in borders. She definitely doesn't believe in the border wall. She campaigned against it when President Trump was in office his first term, and she was against anything that he tried to do during his first term. And she was most recently seen taking advantage of the death of the Pope in order to push the illegal immigration agenda, propaganda on national television. Take a look.
Any wall would cost billions of dollars and have very limited effectiveness.
But the concept of stop the overstaying of visas, I guess, doesn't have the same ring to it as build that wall.
It doesn't, but you build a wall and someone else is going to build a higher ladder. I just want to point something out to our colleagues over at Fox and Friends. I don't think there's anyone who is saying a life of a child in Idaho or Iowa means less than someone on the other side of the border. I think this is about humanity and the mistreatment of children. And if you are so worried about how every American child is treated, think about the money that is being blown, that is being spent, that is being flushed down a toilet for this political theater. You would think that undocumented immigrants are bringing higher rates of violent crime to the United States. Well, guess what? They are not. Statistics, facts, show that they're actually less likely to commit violent crimes than U.S. citizens are. And if you took the president and his most ardent allies at their word, you would think terrorists are pouring in across the border. You would believe them, because shouldn't people believe their government leaders? It was a week ago that President Trump tweeted this: our southern border has long been an open wound where drugs, criminals, including human traffickers and illegals, would pour into our country. And I have to say something quickly. You do not see the majority of drugs pour into our country on foot. That is not true. And having a wall isn't the only option for border security.
Jesus saying on the night he was handed over to suffering and death, in the words of the right, he commanded us to love one another as I have loved you. And I think that was the guiding star for this Pope.
Blessed are the meek. Juxtapose that, though, John, with how different that is with where we are as a society right now, not just Americans, but Europeans around the world, how this anti-immigrant movement has risen up. Well, you have a Pope who over and over made it his mission to talk about the importance of protecting those who are most vulnerable.
Well, you have, democracy and Christianity, and this is not to get into Christian nationalism and the often unhealthy blending of faith and power politics, but democracy and Christianity have a great deal in common. It requires us to see one another as fellow children of God. And that may sound grand or soft somehow, but that is, in fact, the motive force of democracy.
Yeah, so all of you should understand how far left this individual is on the issue of immigration. Just keep that in mind as we get into this clip. So without further ado, let's get into it.
40% of Americans don't trust mainstream media. Why is that? How did we get here?
Listen, we are seeing a huge loss in trust of all of our institutions. It's the media, it's medicine, it's banking. It's a huge problem because when you think about democracy and all of these pillars, they need to stand tall, they need to stand strong. And sort of losing that trust is not by accident, it's by design. If you remember when President Trump was running the first time, Steve Bannon once said, the goal is to blow the whole thing up. And so I think that you've got mistakes made or things starting to slip, while at the same time there's a concerted effort to destroy the media. Because the media, the news media, is, in my opinion, the last line of defense of holding power accountable, right? And you had a bit of a perfect storm, right? President Trump won, and tons of people were shocked or angry or frustrated, and they're tuning out. And at the same time, you have the Elon Musk media machine, because they want you to leave traditional media and they want you to go to X, which is a bastion of misinformation where there is no fact checking. So it's
Pause. There is no fact checking on X. Really? Really? There's definitely fact checking on X, okay? Community notes on X. They're just mad because there's no liberal fact checking, right? In regards to how all the fact checks are not slanted in favor of the left. But that is something that a lot of these social media platforms have chosen to pull back on, because a lot of people have found out, or they've come to understand, that fact checks are not fact checks, right? When you talk about the fact checks on Facebook and some of these other sites, I mean, this is just left-wing propaganda, right? That's all it is. It's just spin. It's just narrative. That's all it is, okay? So what you have here is Stephanie Ruhle trying to blame Trump and Elon Musk for why is it that people don't trust so-called journalists like her, right? Why don't they trust the traditional news media? Well, the reason why is because the news media has lied and lied and lied and lied and lied. And look, she's continuing to lie to the American people. And it's not because of Trump, in the sense that Trump has caused the media to not be trusted. Is the media's obsession with Trump is why they're not trusted, because their obsession with being anti-Trump, everything is Trump's fault. They cover every bad story about Trump, everything negative. They never cover anything positive. They never cover anything that hurts the Democrats, especially on MSNBC. It is nothing but straight Democrat propaganda. Yes, because of that, the media gets a lot of things wrong, right? And that has destroyed the media's credibility. Hunter Biden's laptop, COVID, inflation, crime, the border, Joe Biden's mental fitness. These are all things that the liberal media lied about. They just lied, right? And that is why they don't have credibility, okay? Is because they have lied about so many things over the past few years, and it doesn't have anything to do with President Trump making people mistrust the media. It's the media's obsession with Trump is why people don't trust him. She just doesn't understand it, though. Mainly because she doesn't want to understand it, okay? Understanding it for her would mean acknowledging that, hey, our propaganda is not working, right? In fact, our propaganda is what's making us less effective. It's making it so nobody cares about what we have to say.
It's a perfect storm of people saying, I'm angry, I'm frustrated, I'm tuning out, I'm disconnecting. And then you have a force pushing it. But even in the last 2 weeks, what we need to do is just cover what's happening in America, right? We have to cover Democrats trying to figure out what their lane is and how they're going to get back on their feet. And we have to simply cover what this White House is doing. And I think if we do that, right, there's that saying, you know, trust is gained in raindrops and it's lost in buckets. And it's not yes, you're not incorrect that the media has lost trust.
This is where I would push back. When I see this kind of insight and passion being directed at the current administration and the lack of this kind of insight and passion being directed at the previous administration, where, again, I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about left-leaning news media organizations were kind of like, la, 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 everything's fine. Look, the environment's, look, the economy's great, la, 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 immigration's not that much of a problem. And really being Cleopatra, queen of denial. Thank you. Boom.
Wow. Once again, we have somebody in the mainstream liberal media or a Democrat, definitely a liberal, right? An establishment figure, okay? Yesterday it was Elizabeth Warren. Today it is Stephanie Ruhle being confronted on the gaslighting that has come from the Democrat Party and the mainstream liberal media, okay? I think everybody realizes that the Democrat Party, they are a party of liars, right? Of hucksters, fraudsters, okay? Swindlers. This is who they are, okay? They lie, they cheat, they steal, they tell you the exact opposite of reality, and it is really caught up to them, right? If they're being asked these questions, like in podcasts, like on a regular basis, that means that's a real problem, that people legitimately feel like the Democrat Party doesn't have credibility. And this is what I'm trying to tell you guys, like these people, the liberal media, the Democrat Party, they lack credibility. That is their number one problem, because they're literally willing to say anything to appease the far left or to push the Democrat Party agenda. They're willing to lie about the president's mental fitness. They're willing to lie about the border. They're willing to lie about the economy. They're willing to lie about basic differences between biological boys and girls. They'll lie about anything. So when people see that, they start to ask questions about, okay, like, are you going to acknowledge that you guys lied, that you guys were very wrong about a lot of these things over the last 4 years? That is step one to gaining back credibility, right? And when these Democrats and these people in the liberal media, they get on these other podcasts, when they get off of their networks and they start talking, right? They basically show you how fake they really are, to be honest with you. Okay, I can't wait to see Joe Scarborough get questioned about telling the world that if you don't believe Biden is the sharpest he's ever been, then F you, right? He should have been confronted about that on his own show, right? If his show had credibility, somebody should have confronted him about that, right? But, eventually somebody will.
I would push back on immigration. I can specifically remember when Greg Abbott of Texas and Ron DeSantis of Florida sent those buses of migrants to different cities, different parts of the country, which ended up being politically genius for both of them.
Mm-hmm.
The media regularly talked about the fact that Biden was not doing enough in his first 2.5 years on immigration.
No, that's not what the media did. The media did not regularly criticize Biden for not doing enough. That's not what the media did. They did not give the border enough attention, right? Near the attention that it deserved, considering how under the Biden administration, it was an absolute disaster. Anytime they question the Biden administration when it comes to immigration, it was softball. Like, for example, watch Stephanie Ruhle softball Joe Biden when she confronted him about immigration.
You're sending 1,500 troops to the border. People on the left criticize and say it's inhumane. People on the right say you're not putting America priorities first. And employers around this country are saying, we need more workers. This is an economic issue.
Bingo.
Have you given up on Congress doing anything? And if so, is there something you can do to address this?
Yes, there is. Number one, our first bill ever introduced was to reform the system that we have for immigration, number one. Number two, we're in a situation now where those 1,500 people at the border, they're not there to enforce the law. They're there to free up the border agents that need to be on the border, and we're having another 1,000 people coming in, or asylum judges to make judgments to move things along. I've asked this Congress for help in terms of what they need at the border. They need more agents. They need more people to clear people. They need more action to, for example, we need these farm workers.
Yeah, that is Stephanie Ruhle's idea of being tough on the Biden administration when it comes to illegal immigration, right? Just asking these softball questions where she clearly is on the side of the pro-illegal immigration activists, right? She is a pro-illegal immigration activist, to be honest with you.
Immigration. Even though in the last year and a half, you're seeing the numbers go down, he just wasn't doing enough. And you saw it in how people voted, right? You had places like the Bronx, you had places like New Jersey, people who said, I'm not happy with immigration in this country. And that's why Democrats are scrambling to recalibrate now. But I do think that was covered. And I interviewed Vice President Harris in September. And I remember asking her, I said, nobody's eating cats and dogs in Springfield, Ohio. Mm-hmm. However, there are lots of people who live there who aren't happy with the amount of immigrants who have moved there, legally or not, because now their hospitals are stretched and their schools are stretched. And that's the same thing in tons of communities in the country. You know, what do you say to that? And I remember her answer was, well, we had this immigration bill and Donald Trump blocked it. And she's right. So there's nothing to put, she's right, Donald Trump did block the bill. But that doesn't address how people in the country feel. And just getting mired in, well, we tried to pass this thing and it didn't happen. Mm-hmm. What Republicans have been successful at, and they have not solved any of these issues for the American people.
Oh, no. Yes, we have. President Trump has closed the border. Unlike Kamala Harris, they had a chance to close the border. They didn't do it. Saying that, oh, well, we couldn't pass this bipartisan bill is not an excuse because President Trump proved that you don't need a bill in order to close the border, right? You remember they kept saying, you need a bill to close the border. No, you actually don't. Biden could have closed the border. He just chose not to. That's it, right? And Kamala Harris had no interest in closing the border. None of them had interest in closing the border. This is why they wanted that bill, because that bill would not have closed the border.
But they're willing to say some of the they're willing to talk about some of the unpleasant things that people feel. That when people say those things out loud, they're immediately called, xenophobic or racist.
Yeah.
And we have to make space for how people feel. Do you know what I'm saying?
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
My mom and dad live in New Jersey.
Most people, a large majority of people who have a problem with the current immigration crisis and have for the last 5 or 10 years are not racist, but often kind of tarred as racist by the liberal left.
I will tell you, if you go on the internet, people there's loads of clips that will come after me.
I heard about this internet thing. What is it?
After the election, I had not a debate, but a conversation with a friend of mine who was on the show. And I was making the point that I do not think Donald Trump's win means that half the country is racist. I don't believe that. This person really, really came at me that that's easy for me to say as a white woman of privilege that the country's not racist. But I think that's a very quick way to alienate people, right? Like I grew up in New Jersey, and I can tell you that when lots of people in New Jersey now drive over the bridge and it costs, I can't remember because I have Easy Pass, I think $16. And when they hear stories that migrants who live here get a cell phone or they get to live they get to stay in a hotel, that infuriates people because we are living in this moment where, not a moment, in general, everybody wants to feel like life is fair. And right now, lots of different groups of people feel like it's good for this group, it's good for that group, but it's unfair to me. And I think with the immigration crisis, we as a country or political leaders didn't give enough space to people who say, they're not necessarily anti-immigrant, but they're saying, I'm American. I was born here. I went to school here. I work here. I pay taxes. I cannot make ends meet because you're seeing the middle class get squeezed and squeezed. And they're pointing to other groups that are getting support from the government. And the people they're pointing to are migrants. And we need to give space to sort of hear those people, hear what their needs are. And instead, a lot of those people have felt like when they voice their opinions, they're treated like they're xenophobic and they're racist and they're anti-immigrant. And I don't think they are.
A lot of people.
Yeah, well, that type of rhetoric has been spewed on your network, and it comes from your side of the aisle, okay? But I'm glad that Stephanie Ruhle is honest enough to acknowledge that the left is extremely divisive, right? When they come out here and they call people bigots and xenophobes and racist for having opinions that they disagree with. But it's just funny because she regularly has people like that on her network, right, on her channel, spewing that type of rhetoric that she claims is not good, right? It's not good to call people bigots and racists and stuff like that for having a different opinion than you. But, you know, hey, she still platforms it, right? She platforms the lunatics on her show. So she's just as guilty, to be honest with you. But let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.